seen Hadoop introduction theoretically, and now we will actually start working on setting up the cluster. Okay, so there are two ways I will be covering. Lot of guys might have 16 GB laptop, and they have to start setting up the cluster on that 16 GB laptop. With 16 GB laptop, the max you can do is you can set up 4 nodes, 1 with 4 GB and 3 with 2 GB. Means I have covered all those things as part of my videos also, so you don't need to write down, or you don't need to write down. So if you are using 16 GB laptops, make sure you set up a cluster on 4 nodes. If you are using AWS, first you need to understand the cost associated with it before getting into setting up cluster on AWS. And the cost will vary depending upon the size of the cluster you are setting up. I'll be demonstrating a 7-node cluster. For you, either you can use 4-node cluster or 6-node cluster or 7-node cluster, depending upon your interest and the amount of depending upon the amount you can invest. With the 7-node cluster, you will have you will segregate the masters and slaves. Masters are name node, resource manager for HDFS and processing, and also Cloudera manager or Ambari, which I will review in a moment, are considered as masters. So you need to, if you have a 7-node cluster, 3 of the nodes you can categorize them as gateways or masters, and the rest of the 4 as slaves. You will understand that when you actually start giving the presentation. Okay, so if you want to have slides for reference, there is a slide for Amazon Web Services. It is also in GitHub. Once you download the repository, you can see that. So these are the concepts which you need to be familiar with respect to AWS. Here I will not be covering these things because it is already in YouTube, and you have to understand these things while setting up the cluster. So when you actually go through the content on the channel, if you go to the Hadoop administrator playlist where all these videos will be uploaded, if you open this video, okay, here you can see this is called as YouTube card. You can click on this and it will expand and show all the playlists, one with Hortonworks administration on AWS, one Hortonworks administration on virtual machines, one Cloudera. Actually, these are not correct. I have to fix these things. I will fix these things. Here we will have playlists for Cloudera administration on AWS, and one will be Cloudera administration on VMs. Also, I will have there is another concept on YouTube which is called as annotation. I will provide the links here also. So probably it might be distracting for you. So even if you close those annotations, you can expand these cards and you can get the same details here. So I will do both so that you don't need to struggle to find the videos on my channel. Okay. So here I think this is with respect to AWS. Let me see. This is the playlist. Yeah, this is with respect to AWS, and you can see that when you start using AWS, first you need to understand the infrastructure a little bit, and if you actually use AWS, you can claim it as experience on your profile also, and AWS have value. Hello, guys. Sorry, it got disconnected. I hope you guys can hear me. Hello, can you guys hear me? Okay, I hope it is clear. It seems it got disconnected because of the glitch in the internet. If it is not clear, let me know. Okay, so what we are talking about is AWS. So first you need to understand the infrastructure a little bit, and also as I have mentioned, you can claim this as an experience, and AWS will add some value to your profile also. So whoever is willing to invest the money on AWS, just go through these videos. And also others who start with virtual machines, once they are comfortable with setting up the cluster and interacting with Linux effectively, I will highly recommend to set up a 7-node cluster on AWS, which will give some insights about detailed insights about cracking the interviews easily. So make sure you set up a 7-node or 8-node cluster at least once. It will not take very long time once you practice on virtual machines. Those who directly go onto AWS, you have to be very careful. If you are not familiar with Linux, you will end up wasting a lot of money without much productivity. Means if you run into an issue and if you take a lot of time to fix that, and if all the 7 nodes are running while troubleshooting that issue, and if it takes a couple of hours, you will be unnecessarily paying money for all the 7 nodes for those 2 hours. So unless you are very comfortable with Linux, you have to be extremely careful while dealing with all the 7 nodes. With respect to cost, it can be anywhere between $1.50 to $2.50, depending upon the size of the cluster you take. $1.50 to $2.50 every hour on average. Okay, so if within a span of 1 month time, if you spend 100 hours, you will end up paying $150 to $250 to AWS if you decide to set up 6-node or 7-node cluster. If you decide to set up 4-node cluster, the cost will be lower. So all those details are here. There is a video for EC2 pricing, which you need to watch and understand the pricing in detail. If you have any questions about EC2 pricing, you can raise it in LinkedIn discussions of LinkedIn groups with the IT-Big Data. Please join and start creating discussions in that, so that everyone will get insights about those important discussions. Okay. So on top of that, once you provision the servers on AWS, you should be familiar with setting up SSH between the system and the servers. So these videos will cover those things, and then you will actually start setting up the cluster. Similarly, if you go through virtual machines, let me go to the card in a moment. Okay, not this one. I think it's here. Okay. So similarly, if we actually start the playlist of setting up HTTP on virtual machines, first thing what you have to do is, if you are using Windows laptop, make sure you set up Cygwin. Okay, if it is Windows 10, I think there is something called Bash, which eliminates the requirement of setting up Cygwin. But for earlier versions, or even with 10, if Bash is not available as they claim with full features, make sure to set up Cygwin. So Cygwin will give you an interface where you can run Linux type of commands in Windows, and it has a package called SSH. So you have to set up SSH also after setting up of Cygwin, so that you can actually run SSH commands from command prompt or from Cygwin to directly connect to virtual machines, or even AWS. Even for AWS, I will highly recommend to go with Cygwin, so that you get an environment like this on Windows laptop. And then you can start setting up VMware workstation on Windows. You can use VirtualBox also. VirtualBox is free. VMware workstation is costs around $60 to $70, but it has a free trial for 1 month. So all my videos are primarily on VMware. So make sure you use VMware workstation. If you're already familiar with VirtualBox and VMware workstation, and you can work on either of them, then you are feel free to use VirtualBox also. And then first, what you have to do is when you actually install this virtualization software, what it will happen is, most of you guys might not be familiar with this concept of virtualization, so I will try to explain a bit here. So you have a desktop, so or PC, so Windows laptop or Mac, whatever it is. It's a physical server. It has memory, it has CPU, it has storage in it, and using that, lately what happened is, instead of buying multiple physical servers and setting up clusters on them, you can actually get a powerful PC or laptop, and you can actually create virtual machines on that. Even in enterprises also, instead of buying commodity hardware means it's a low-cost hardware, okay, which are used in enterprises. Enterprises use different types of computers than our laptops and desktops, because it has to support real-time and mission-critical applications. So enterprise hardware will be significantly different, but they also have memory, they also have CPUs and storage. So the underlying concepts are same. The only thing is the configuration is different. So once the enterprise get a very powerful server, they tend to create virtual machines of whatever configuration they want. So if you have 128 GB RAM on a server, you can create as many virtual machines as you want, depending upon the memory you give to virtual machine. So let's say on average, we want to give 4 GB RAM for each of the virtual machine. On a 128 GB big server, we can create virtual computers. Virtual computer is nothing but a software. You won't find anything physically for virtual computer. So it's nothing but a software, and that software will behave like a computer for you, which is virtual in nature. You will give memory out of your server to that virtual server. So out of this 128 GB RAM, if you create a servers of size or virtual machines of size 4 GB, you can create 32 virtual machines on it. Similarly, if you have 16 GB laptop, as I have mentioned to you earlier, you have to create 4 virtual machines, one with 4 GB RAM and 3 with 2 GB RAM. So you will be allocating 10 GB memory to the virtual machines, and rest of the 6 GB you have to keep for your laptop. Your system has to be up and running. You have to check your emails and whatever resources that are required for your laptop to perform your day-to-day activities. You need to give some memory to that. So 6 GB out of 16 GB has to be retained for your desktop, otherwise your desktop will become unstable, and give only 10 GB RAM to the virtual machines, 10 to 12 GB at max. Okay. So to create those virtual machines, we need a software, and these are the softwares: VMware Workstation or VirtualBox. So first you need to install that, and then you have to create a template host. Template host in the sense, we will create one host with all the prerequisites and we'll clone that. So instead of creating four virtual machines directly, first we will create one which is designated as template. So once you have the host with memory, CPU and storage, you have to install operating system. So this video will cover how to install CentOS on that template, and then we have to perform certain activities to configure network. We have to update hosts file. If you are not familiar with Linux, you have to explore all these things. What is the significance of hosts file, etc. Okay, I will not be covering those extensively as part of these videos. As part of these videos, the videos assume that you have some basic knowledge of Linux. So if you are confused with any term, you have to explore and you have to gain that knowledge. And then you have to establish internet connectivity and install software on CentOS. So when I say internet connectivity, your virtual machine should be capable of connecting to the internet, in the sense like websites like Google and all. The reason why it has to connect to internet is we have to install certain softwares on CentOS. Earlier, in this step, we will be performing expert installation where we will not install desktop. So you will not be able to access the virtual machine the same way as you access your PC or your laptop. Instead, you will be only be able to access these machines through command line like this using SSH to connect to them. Okay. So on top of that basic installation, we will be installing additional softwares like nano editors, etc. To modify the files. The reason why you should not install desktop is if you try to set up 4-node cluster with 4 GB on one VM and 2 GB on other VMs, and if you start setting up desktop on them, your desktop will itself take a lot of resources. So your productivity will go down significantly when you try to set up the cluster on the virtual machines which have CentOS or Red Hat desktop on them. So just perform expert installation as highlighted in this video, and then install the additional necessary softwares. So when we do actual expert installation, it will only install core Linux kernel. It will not install the components which will provide you graphical user interface on these CentOS machines. Okay. So once you install the additional softwares, you have to perform certain prerequisites on those virtual machines, such as passwordless login, and also you have to install VMware tools. So till here we just created the template. We have not created all the 4 virtual machines with OS. Okay, once we install the VMware tools, once you go to the checkpoint, what you have to do is, here using the template you can clone into 4 virtual machines. So for template you can give any either 2 GB or 4 GB, whatever you want you can give, because the template virtual machine, once it is cloned, or even once we set up OS and once we install prerequisites, we will hardly bring it up, we will keep it down. So even if you give 12 GB out of 16 GB RAM to it, there is no harm in that. Okay, but when you are cloning these 4 virtual machines, you have to give memory accurately to the virtual machines, and then you have to set up SSH and all the nodes following this video. So these prerequisites for the first timers will take enormous amount of time. So you have 4 days for next class. So by that time, try to get it done so that you can start setting up the cluster from next week. And this is just the foundation before we install Hadoop on the cluster. Okay. So when you use AWS, you don't need to worry about most of these things. Okay, because in AWS, when we actually try to launch instances, we will launch instances with OS, and we will use CentOS or Red Hat for that. I will recommend CentOS, but you can use Red Hat also. Okay, so you don't need to worry about most of the steps till this 16th video. Okay, and then once you again, I'm coming back to the virtual machines. I just brought up AWS to just compare the effort it will take. With AWS, probably it might take a couple of hours or 4 hours to understand what is what, and once you provision the instances, within minutes you will have whatever size of cluster, whatever number of instances you want. Whereas with the virtual machines, you have to put all this effort and before actually start setting up the cluster. Okay, so where we are, so we are here. Once we clone all the 4 instances, we have to set up parallel SSH parallel SSH is required so that you can actually issue a command on multiple nodes in one shot. So that's what parallel SSH is all about. This is required even for AWS, and then we will actually start setting up the cluster. So till this point, we are only getting the infrastructure to set up the cluster and practice the process of setting up the cluster. Once we get these things, then what you have to do is you have to set up 1 minute. You have to set up a HTTPD server. There should be a video for that. I'm trying to search for it. Okay. Let me. Yeah, so here you can see. I think the VMs section also might have it. I have to check into it. So you have to set up HTTPD for M repository server. So here I will do some whiteboarding and explain the relevance of HTTPD server. Just give me a moment. I have to get the tablet so that I can start whiteboarding. Okay, I'll come in a minute. So here you need to understand the relevance of HTTPD server so that you can actually start setting up the cluster. Okay. Okay, so now I will do the whiteboarding. So once we, so far what I have explained is getting the servers. So whether it is AWS or virtual machines. So let's say we set up with 4 instances, for example. So whether you set up VMs on your PC or AWS, you will get all these 4 instances. And then what will happen is the reason why you have to set up the HTTPD server. I hope you guys can hear me. If you have any issues, please let me know. Hello, can you guys confirm whether you guys can hear me? Yeah, thank you. So here what I'm saying is, so this is AWS or virtual machines which you have set up, and then the reason why we have to set up HTTPD server is, let's say on typical Hadoop cluster we have 100 nodes. Okay, in an enterprise. So this is an enterprise setup, and you have hundreds of nodes in it. Okay, and the steps when we actually start setting up the cluster, you will understand. For any software, if you have to set up, you can. There are 3 important steps. One is, first you have to download the software. Then you have to install the software, then you have to configure the software. So the HTTPD server uh, is to perform the download on this very huge number of servers effectively. Okay, so in a in a given enterprise, let's say you have hundreds of nodes on which, or hundreds of physical servers on which you want to set up the Hadoop cluster. So you have to download the software first. So Hadoop comes with binaries of size around 4 GB. Okay, if you have 100 nodes in a cluster, this 4 GB software has to be downloaded on each and every node in the cluster. So if these nodes are directly connected to internet, and if we try to download softwares from the public repositories provided by Cloudera or Ambari, so those public repositories are accessible via internet. So if you try to download the Hadoop software and the Cloudera or Ambari's Hortonworks software from the public repositories published by Cloudera or Ambari onto all these 100 nodes, each and every node has to connect through internet, and they have to download these 4 GB files to each of the hosts in the cluster, which saturates the enterprise network, which can have adverse impact on the other applications. So typically in an enterprise, again, most of you guys are very new to this, and this concept is very, very important. You need to understand it. If you don't understand it, let me know. I will review again. Okay. So first, the limitation is when we set up the Hadoop cluster, we will set up on hundreds of nodes in the cluster. Okay. And we cannot afford each and every node connect to internet to download these packages of Cloudera or Hortonworks, which is of 4 GB. So if you try to download from all the nodes, they try to download the same packages, and even Cloudera will be saturated, and also the enterprise network, more significantly the enterprise network also will be saturated, and it can adversely impact the other applications. So not only with respect to Hadoop, in any enterprise, typically the hosts will not be able to connect to the internet. The way we can connect to the internet, it is not possible for the hosts in the enterprise. All the hosts in the enterprise will try to can connect to the internet. Only there will be designated hosts which will be opened in firewall to connect to the internet. So if you are familiar with enterprise infrastructure, there will be firewalls also deployed. Firewalls are the ones which will block the malware, viruses, etc. So that firewall, so all these hosts will be behind that firewall. Okay, and only certain hosts will be opened up to the internet access, and others will not have access to the internet. So what they do is, let's say we are actually setting up Red Hat as the operating system to set up our cluster, or CentOS. Both are same or similar. So Red Hat or CentOS have something called public repositories. Okay, and those public repositories will be configured on one of the hosts in the enterprise. So they will take They will take one host, let's say this one. They will open it up for the internet, opening the ports, and this host will be able to access the internet. So they will configure public repositories on this host, and then all the hosts will be able to connect to this to download the software. So even for the Hadoop, setting up the Hadoop, we need to have a repository server which actually have this 4 GB files local to the enterprise, and local internet is always be faster. They will be connected with fiber optics compared to the external internet, which is limited because of several other factors, which I don't want to get into details now. Just remember that the local internet is very fast because they will be interconnected with fiber optics compared to the internet, public internet. Okay, So now we have that 4 GB files in this server, and then all the other hosts in the enterprise should be able to access the repositories hosted on this. So to actually have the yum local repository server, first you have to install something called HTTPD or HTTP server. Once you set up the HTTP server on those on that repository server, then you can configure yum repositories on that, so that all the other hosts can access the binaries of or the software of Hadoop to download while setting up the cluster. So this video I will show on my cluster also in a moment. So this video will show how to set up HTTPD for yum repository server, and then the next one will show how to set up yum repository on one of the servers. Okay, so the first one is HTTPD, which is prerequisite for yum repository. So in the interview, they might ask the question about how to set up the cluster. So the first step is, because up to OS you don't deal in the company, setting up the OS or networking you don't need to worry about as a Hadoop admin. But once you get the servers to set up the Hadoop cluster, first thing you need to do is you have to work with system admins, or if you have root access, you yourself have to set up HTTPD on the on one of the servers, or for the existing enterprise yum repository server, you have to add yum repository for setting up the cluster. Okay, so you have to do either of them or both. Sometimes you have to do both, because we will have a designated yum repository server for big data systems such as Hadoop. So you might have to get the root access on all the hosts in the cluster. Use one of them as yum repository server. First, you need to open the firewall so that it can connect to the internet, at least for temporary purpose. Once the internet is established, download the Cloudera or Hortonworks software and enable the yum repository server on it, and then you can ask them to disable the internet for that host. And then when you actually set up the cluster, all the hosts in the cluster will try to connect to this yum repository server to get the to download the software before setting up on the cluster. Okay, so is it clear, or anyone have questions? Because this is a very, very important concept which you need to understand before setting up the cluster. Okay, it will take a while to bring up all the instances. So I have a 7-node cluster which is running Cloudera on my AWS account, and also I have 6-node or 7-node cluster with Hortonworks also. So over time I will show you both so that you can get a feel of both as part of the class. For the practice purpose, you can choose whether Cloudera or Hortonworks to practice. And for certification, if you are interested in giving the certification, make sure you prepare for Hortonworks certification, not the Cloudera certification. So there is a question. How do you? Yeah, I will show that. I will demonstrate that. So it depends upon the two. There will be little bit of differences between the distributions, but yeah, I will show you. I will show you in both how it works. Okay, so I will be starting the Hortonworks cluster also, so that I can demonstrate how it look like. In both the cases. Okay, by now my Cloudera cluster have come up. So I'm connecting to my Cloudera cluster. So I'm using, so this is my terminal. Okay, this is the terminal which is running on my PC, and this instance CDH master 01 which I will be connecting to is actually in AWS. Okay, and now I'm trying to connect to it. I'm in the server. Okay, now if I go to etc m.repos.d ls-ltr, there are these two are created by me, and if you go to the instructions of Cloudera or Hortonworks, it will show how to get these files. Okay, and here this is my m repository server. Okay, if you look into these files, it is pointing to my local repository, local m repository server on HTTP. So to connect to the centralized local m repository server, you have to set up HTTPD first, which is already done on this, and then there is something called document root. I will show the HTTPD configuration file also, then you will understand in detail. So on this host, IP 172.31.53.242, which is an EC2 instance, which is nothing but the same host which I am connected to. There is this directory structure which have all the repositories for Cloudera in this environment. Okay, so so if we want to use this centralized server from other hosts to set up, we just have to copy these repo files. Okay, and these repo files are the ones which will have the details about the local centralized M repository server. So to run this local centralized M repository server and facilitate the other hosts to connect to this local centralized M repository server, first we have to set up HTTPD. And the videos which I have shown earlier, I will go to the entire cycle. Okay. Someone have asked me to show the repository location. That's where we are going. First, we have to start with HTTPD. Okay. So the video which I have shown earlier, which says set up HTTPD, will actually show the instructions about setting up HTTPD, starting it, and also enabling it on the reboots. All those things are covered in that video. One thing which you have to focus is under etc httpd. There will be a directory called const, and here there will be a file called httpd.const. Okay, you have to modify this file once you download, so that it runs HTTP server properly for you. And if you go through my videos, it will highlight what are locations you have to modify. So I will not get into these details as of now. As part of now, you can watch the video while performing hands-on, and it will be clear to you. So if you go to the end of the file, okay, if you are not very familiar with the VA editor, make sure you use Nano editor. It might be simpler than this one. Otherwise, if you are using Windows, you can set up Ultra Edit on your laptop, and Ultra Edit will facilitate you to actually read the files over the network using SSH, and you will be able to modify very easily using Ultra Edit. Again, if you go back to these videos, this is AWS. If you go to VM's video, here I have shown a little bit about text editors. So better to use Ultra Edit if you are completely new to Linux. Ultra Edit will facilitate you to connect to the files that are stored remotely on a remote host onto your PC, and you can modify and you can save it directly. You can use regular expressions, you can use search and replace, etc. So if you are not very familiar with VA editor, make sure you use Ultra Edit so that you make these modifications quicker. But over time, it is very important to familiarize with the VA editor or Nano editor so that you can work in in Linux-based environments effectively. Unlike our college, we hardly use Windows for the enterprises. Yes, to access emails and all, you use Windows, but the actual applications will be set up on Linux only. So it will be better to use Linux-based tools than Windows-based tools as part of your college, as most of you guys are still going to college in this class. Okay. Anyway, that is not that is a side topic. So the most important parameter, almost every parameter is important, but for the current discussion, the most important parameter is document root in this HTTP configuration file. Okay, and here it says this is the location for the document root. Now I am coming out of it, and now I am again going to the etc.repos.d. This is the location for the repository configuration files, and here if you cat on one of the files, let's say Cloudera manager.repo, and hit enter, you see HTTP and then a directory structure. And also, if you see HTTPD conf, you see this one, document root, and here the HTTP IP address. So document root will be pointing to this one. So when you actually try to access using HTTP for this setup, it will try to access this location. So when you try to remotely connect to this, for example, as of now HTTP server is running on this. So when I try to actually access that host using HTTP server, yeah, I will explain the document root again. Okay, if you see this is a public DNS of my EC2 instance on which that HTTP server is running. Okay, and if you see here, it is launching a valid website. It's a Apache website web page, but it's a valid web page. Okay, and so here when we try to access, so when I actually do HTTP : / and the public DNS here, or let me show you with the private DNS itself so that you don't confuse. Let me start something called SSH tunneling. You will understand what is SSH tunneling when you actually watch my videos. I will not explain what is SSH tunneling now. And then we have to enable Foxy proxy to access anything that is running with private IPs. So when you actually watch the videos, you will understand the difference between public IP, private IP, and whatever I am doing here will make sense for you. Okay, for now just understand that I am trying to access the web server running on this host using HTTP protocol. See here, now it has successfully rendered the same page. So whatever it is trying to, so to get this, it has to read a file somewhere on the host. So the files that will be read when we try to run this is the file which will be stored under document root. Okay, so document root, when we try to actually access a remote server using HTTP, it will try to access the files that are there under the document root. Now let's go to the document root and see what is there in that. Sorry, I have to copy this one. Okay, and ls-ltr. Yeah, so okay, 1 minute. Yeah. So when we actually launch the HTTP page, the default HTTP page, it will go to where www, and then there is a HTML directory here. Okay. I think this page is somewhere cached internally. That's fine. No need to worry about where from where this page is coming. That is not that relevant. But somewhere it will be there. Anyway, first let us understand what is the relationship between this document root and the web page. So when you actually host the repositories or any documents, not only the repositories such as Cloudera or Hortonworks, it will try to go to the document root and try to see whether that directory structure is there or not. So in this case, if you go back here, the document root is this one, whereas the HTTP page is this path. Okay. So if you go to the document root and copy this path, so first let us go to the document root here, cd. Now we are in the document root which is specified in the HTTP configuration file, and then you have this directory structure which is defined as part of the base URL. Okay, and it should resolve into a valid directory structure, otherwise it will fail. Okay, so this is the location where we have the repositories, especially in the RPMs directory. So now if we run find command, finder is the Linux command to find the files. If you run the find command just to search for all the files and hit enter, it will show several files with .rpm extension. .rpm is the installable file in Red Hat or CentOS Linux. Okay, so this is the, let me again cat the document root. So this is the document root value, and cat etc m.report.d Cloudera manager.repo. This is the base URL for Cloudera Manager. Cloudera Manager is one of the components while setting up the Hadoop cluster. We will have two repositories. One is Cloudera Manager, which is the management tool, and the CDH, which is Hadoop itself. So for Cloudera Manager, the base URL is this one, which should be cd. So document root for HTTP IP address. So cd till there, and then the rest of the path which is specified here should have the base URL for our repository. And GPG key is primarily to validate from which server we are trying to connect to those repositories. So you need to have GPG key configured. Anyway, it is not that important to understand GPG key in detail. The main thing which you need to understand is how to set up the HTTP server. First you have to download and then configure by modifying this file, httpd.conf file, and then you have to set up the repository by following the documentation of Cloudera or Hortonworks, whatever distribution you choose. Those details are provided as part of the videos. You have to download by running commands such as reposync, which will download the repository, and then you have to create a proper directory structure and update the Cloudera manager.repo or Cloudera cdh.repo file to point to the appropriate repositories. And then you have to copy these two files onto all the other hosts in the cluster so that they are aware where the Hadoop cluster is. Okay. I think WebEx is disconnected. if you guys are on call unexpectedly. So I'm launching it in a moment. So we'll resume. So we are talking about the relationship between HTTPD and YAM repository and how they are connected. So you have to take the URL from the base, and the HTTP and IP address should resolve into document root. So unless you have the directory structure in this format, you will see issues such as cannot connect to host or unable to access repository, etc. when you try to set up the Hadoop later. And this is not just limited to Hadoop. In most of the cases, the enterprises do the similar manner. They set up the centralized M repository server, and they pass on the repo files for the application system administrators who are managing the applications so that they can actually use YAM, which is a Linux-based installer, or Red Hat Linux-based installer, to set up the softwares on whatever host they want. And if you look into this location, it have RPM files which are nothing but Red Hat based installables in that. Okay, the base URL will have the directory called RPMs, and that RPMs will have the actual RPM files, which will be installed when we try to set up the cluster. Okay, I hope everything is clear. If you guys still have questions on it, let me know before I move forward. And so far, we only covered about setting up virtual machines or provisioning EC2 instances, and then layout foundation so that we can actually build the cluster on top of the instances or virtual machines which we have created or provisioned. So once you set up HTTPD, and YAM repository server, then you need to set up parallel SSH. Parallel SSH is a Google-based tool. Let me show you, before getting into that, let me show you the HTTP also, so that you have an idea about it. So I'm exiting from the host of Cloudera, one of the hosts of Cloudera, and now I'm trying to connect to some other host for Hortonworks. So this is the Hortonworks public DNS. Now I am trying to connect to that. And if you are following Hortonworks videos, Hortonworks is set up using Red Hat, but I will recommend you to use CentOS rather than Red Hat, because Red Hat have 5 cents additional cost for the OS. So instead of Red Hat, go with CentOS, and I will help you if you run into any issues while setting up CentOS rather than Red Hat if you follow with Hortonworks. Okay, but use CentOS, not the Red Hat. I will provide you the link of the video which will actually highlight how to set up CentOS related instances on AWS. Okay, but the current videos in those playlists are on Red Hat. So now I logged into the Red Hat, Hortonworks YAM repository server, and if you sudo to root and then go to etc m.repos.d and ls-ltr, with respect to Red Hat, you will find these two files, ambari.repo and http.repo. These ones are internally created. You don't need to create by yourself. I do not remember. I think you have to create all the 3 repo files when you try to set up Hortonworks platform. Yes, you have to set up all the 3 repo files. And now if you review these things, ambari.repo or http.repo or httptools.repo, it will be pointing to the local same thing. Here this whatever the document root is will be pointing to this, and then there should be directory layout like this, and this CentOS 6 location should have the RPMs deployed on there. So for that you have to run commands such as repo sync and create repo files, which will take care of it. Okay, so it's not that you directly modify like this. First you have to have the public URLs for, on the M repository server. Then you have to run the repo sync. Once the repositories are synced, then you have to modify the URLs to the appropriate locations, which points to our centralized M repository server. Once you follow the videos, you will understand. There will be no issues with respect to it. Now I will be seeing the document root etc http m.repos.d http d.conf httpd.conf, and this is the document root. Okay, and this is the location for base URL to set up Ambari connecting to this repository server. So cd document root, whatever directory is there in document root, I have pasted here, and then this one. It's a valid directory, and if you see here, there are repositories related to HTTP in here. So here you can go to Ambari, and you will find all the RPM files here. Okay, so this is how you can actually set up the HTTPD server, then M repository server, then create the repo sync, modify the repo files, and share those repo files onto the other hosts. Now if we actually connect to any other host, SSH root, sorry, I cannot actually connect to it. Okay, so I am getting onto the other host. Now if you go to etc m.repos.d and ls-ltr, you have these repo files which are copied from 37, where we have the M repository server. Then if you look into any of these ambari.repo or hdp.repo or hdputils.repo, you see the base URL is pointing to 37. So all the hosts now, when I try to set up Ambari, we'll try to connect to the repository server, M repository server, which is running on 37. So now we have simulated the enterprise type of scenario on our environment, and we have to take care in both virtual machines as well as AWS. It is very important, more than interviews, it is very, very important while working. If you have to set up the cluster, you have to understand the steps involved in it, and then only it will be smoother, otherwise it will be tough. Okay, now I will actually talk about parallel SSH. Before that, let me stop this cluster, otherwise I will be unnecessarily wasting the money. Instance state, stop. I will leave the Cloudera one as is, but I have stopped the Hortonworks cluster. Yes, Ratan, you can ask the questions. Hello? Either you can unmute and ask the question, or you can also type the question here. In Hortonworks certification practice exam, ambari.repo has public repos instead of local repo. Is it okay to copy it to a new host, or do I have to configure to local repo? It's a very good question. I understand the question. So unlike Hadoop, so if you log on to that host, let me log on to the Cloudera. Okay, as I have mentioned to you earlier, there are multiple repositories, not just one repository. If it is Hortonworks, you have Ambari, you have HTTP and HTTP utils. HTTP and HTTP utils are for Hadoop that needs to be deployed with Hortonworks. and then you have ambari.repo. Ambari.repo is primarily to set up Ambari, and you don't set up Ambari on all the hosts in the cluster. You will set up only on the Ambari server on one host, and then Ambari agent on all others. So as part of the certification exam, the practice exam, they have set up Ambari agent on all of them. Okay, and if you follow the questions, they ask you to set up, they ask you to add a new host to the cluster, and agent might be already running on that cluster, and all you have to do is you have to copy the hdp.repo files. So whatever you have on the main server, you have to have the same files on the other ones also. You don't need to actually create a new one pointing to the local repository. In the practice exam lab or practice exam cluster, they have local repository only for HTTP. They don't have local repository for Ambari. So if you look into the hdp.repo file, it will be pointing to the centralized local and repository server. So whatever you have there, you just have to copy into the other host. And also, if you are not very comfortable with that, what you can do is, instead of looking only on the name node, which is the server which have Ambari also in the practice exam, you look into the other hosts which are already added to the cluster, and use the repo files from those hosts. Okay, so is it clear, Naresh? So instead of getting the repo files from name node, go to other host, either node 2 or Hive server, and try to copy those repo files into the new node that is being added while you practice for the exam. Ratan, what is your questions? If you are speaking, I could not hear you. If not, please type the question in the chat, or you can unmute the phone and you can ask the question for the phone also, or the audio as well. Hello Ratan, are you there? So which steps are you talking about? Are you talking about setting up M repository server or setting up the Hadoop cluster altogether? So HTTP. So to set up the HTTP, there are only 2 steps. Okay, altogether you will understand over time. So first we laid the foundation, then we have to set up Ambari or Cloudera manager, and then we will set up the Hadoop using the distribution. Those things will be covered later. Yeah, that's what. You have to perform hands-on for that, and if you want to understand detailed steps of setting up HTTPD, you have to look into these videos. Okay, it's very simple. It will not take very long time. First, you have to just run yum command like this: yum-y install HTTPD. Okay, then it will install the software. It will download HTTPD on the host, and it will install on that host. And then you have to configure it by going to that location, etc httpd conf httpd.conf, make the necessary modifications as highlighted in this video, and then you have to restart the httpd server, and also you have to enable so that it can be started on reboots by using a command called checkconfig. So you have to watch this video to understand the entire flow. It will not take very long time to set up httpd, as long as you don't have typos in httpd.conf. Okay. So that's the relevance of HTTPD and Ambari. Unless you have any questions, I will go to parallel SSH, the relevance of it and all. So setting up parallel SSH is a little bit different between AWS and VMs. If you are using VMs, you have to set up parallel SSH on your terminal or SIGWIN. Okay, and if you are using AWS, then you have to set up parallel SSH on one of the hosts called Gateway or Master 01 or Bastion. whatever term I use, I have highlighted as part of these videos. So you have to set up parallel SSH. So I will show the power of the parallel SSH. Again, it is very easy to set up. I have explained the details as part of those videos. Now I will show the power of parallel SSH. So I am in my home directory on this host which I have connected. Okay, and here there is a directory called setup_cluster. Here there is a file called host.txt, and that is created by me, and I have all the IP addresses, private IPs of AWS instances in this hosts.txt file. Now, if I want to run a particular Linux command or a shell script on these servers, I can actually use something called pssh or pscp commands to copy any script and then execute that script on all the hosts in the cluster. It is very, very important for you to set up parallel SSH, because once we provision the EC2 instances, we have to set up prerequisites. I will be covering prerequisites in a moment. Those prerequisites are nothing but changing to the kernel settings, changes to the kernel settings, which are required for either of the distributions. So if you go on to each of the hosts, again, if you go back to the whiteboard, if you have 100 hosts in the cluster, if you have to log into each of the hosts and set up the prerequisites manually, it will take enormous amount of time, like 2-3 days to cover all the hosts. Okay, and no matter how efficient you are with the command line tools, it will take at least a day to set up all these prerequisites on all the hosts in the cluster. Again, I will review the prerequisites later. For now, I am only explaining the relevance of the parallel SSH. So if you want to perform a task on all the nodes in the cluster in parallel, you can use this tool called pssh. So for that, so this preparednode.sh, if you look into that script, again, all these details are in my GitHub account. I will show the location of these files for both Cloudera as well as Hortonworks in a moment. But for now, let me show you the script. So this is the script which you need to run. We need to change the umask settings. I will explain what is umask. We have to disable SELinux, etc. So there are multiple prerequisites. And if we have to perform all these tasks in one shot, instead of logging into each of the hosts, you can actually use this concept of parallel SSH. Okay. Now let me go to this setup_CentOS.sh. So I'm only showing you how to run this one. Okay, if I have that, it will reboot all the hosts, which I don't want. Anyway, so if you see these commands, it is using two commands, pscp and pssh. Both these commands are from parallel SSH. Okay, what this pscp is trying to do is, so first thing is, these are some control arguments which you just need to remember, or which you just need to copy paste from the available commands. And then this is the username, -h to pass the hosts. Hosts can be either hard-coded and passed space separated, or you can have in a text file. So when you are dealing with hundreds of nodes, it's better to create a text a file which have all the IP addresses of all the hosts on which you need to set up these prerequisites. And then -x is to execute preparednode.sh, and then it will actually copy this file called preparednode.sh to this location on all the hosts in the cluster. Okay, so whenever you run these scripts, make sure you always use the fully qualified path for the files rather than a relative path the way I have done here. So /root/preparednode.sh is the location on my local machine, and I'm trying to copy it to all the hosts to this location /root slash prepare node.sh. Okay, so these two can be different. I think in this case also it should be root setup underscore cluster slash. This is the location of the file which I am trying to copy from the host where I am running the script to all the hosts which are there in host.txt file. Okay, and then pssh command will actually run that command, run whatever you want. In this case, I am trying to run prepare node.sh script. Again, it's better to give the complete path here. Using fully qualified paths is always better practice as an administrator rather than using relative paths. And I want to create a log file. So when I run these scripts, I want to see the status of it, and hence I am actually creating a log file for the script. Okay, so now we have made the necessary changes for our setup CentOS.sh script. We should have execute permissions on this, and then we can run it. Now it is running. First thing it is doing is it is copying to prepare node. It is copying prepare node.sh script to all the nodes. Okay, now the copy is done. Now it is actually executing the scripts. Even if you have 100 nodes, once the copy is done, the scripts will run in parallel. Okay, so it will be very fast. You can execute the script on hundreds of nodes within no time using this parallel SSH. It's a very simple tool to learn, and it will actually simplify the process quite a bit. Okay, now it is saying success. You can go to any of these hosts. So let me log into one of this SSH root at the IP address and ls-ltr. You can see the prepare node.sh file is copied and also executed, and the log file is generated, and we can actually look into the log to see what have happened. Okay, so this is how you can use PSSH to perform all the tasks in parallel. Again, this parallel SSH is very productive for administrators, not only for Hadoop, for general administrators also. But one of the prerequisites to use parallel SSH is you need to have passwordless SSH configured on all the hosts in the clusters, on all the nodes in the cluster, and also you have to use the same user. It's not that you can use different users to execute same script. You cannot do that. You have to use the same user on all the hosts, and it has to be configured with passwordless login. And passwordless login is taken care as part of the prerequisites here. For AWS, it is by default passwordless login. So it's very straightforward when it comes to AWS. For virtual machines, you have to set up passwordless login, and it is part of the prerequisites. Okay, once we set up the parallel SSH, then we have to set up the prerequisites. Now I will review what are these prerequisites are. Okay, so this is I'm going back to my original post from which I have run the parallel SSH. Again, when it comes to AWS, you have to set up parallel SSH on one of the hosts in the cluster which is designated as gateway or client or bastion. Typically, I choose the first host with, to have the all these tools in AWS. When it comes to virtual machines, you have to set up parallel SSH on your Windows laptop or your Mac or whatever environment you are using to build those virtual machines. It's better to set up parallel SSH on it. Now we will actually review the prerequisites, which is very important when you try to set up the cluster. So the first prerequisite is umask. Okay, so umask is a Linux feature, so which you need to understand as an administrator. So let's say I try to create a file, touch testing. Touch is again a Linux command which will try to create an empty file. Okay. Now you can see my testing file is created with owner, group, and certain permissions. Okay. So the owner of this testing is root, the group is root, and it has different types of permissions for different people. So this is called as octet. Octets. These are called as octets. There are 3 octets in this. This is 1 octet. If you are familiar with binary numbers, octet is nothing but 8. Okay, which is 1000. But it starts with 0. So octet, the maximum value of octet is 7, and it is represented by 111. Okay, so here this is 1 octet, this is another octet, and this is another octet. And then first one will tell whether it is a directory, file, or a soft link, etc. If it is not set with a D or L, then it's a file. If it is D, it's a directory. If it is L, it's a symbolic link. Then the first octet after first hyphen can be read as 110. So first 2 bits are set and the last bit is not set. Okay, so 110 means the owner. So the first octet is for owner. Owner is root here. The owner can read and write on this file. Okay, and the second octet is the other users in a group. So here there is a group. A group can have multiple users, multiple OS users in it. So as part of that group, all the other users than the owner will have permissions which are specified in this octet, and that is represented with 100. So first one is owner, second one is group, other users in the group other than owner, and third one is all the other users than the owner and the group which are specified here. Okay, so they also have permissions 100, and here the owner have 110, other users have 100, other users in the group have 100, all the other users that are not part of the owner or the group have 100, which means that owner have read and write permissions, and group the other members in group have only read permission, and all others have only the read permission. So umask is to set all the files that are being created, set the default permissions on all the files that are being created. So right now, if you look at the umask, the value is 022. Okay, so 022 in the sense if the current owner try to create a file, it will be created with 755. Okay, actually these apply at the directory level. 755 in the sense it's 111, 101, and 101. So let's say, let me create a directory here. mkdir tst and ls ltr. You can see that directories are created with this permission because of the umask. Okay, so 022 resolves into 755. Umask is the counter for the permissions which needs to be given. Okay, so we are trying to, what are the permissions we are trying to mask is umask. Okay, here we are trying to mask write permissions by giving 111, 101, 5 in binary is represented as 101, and 101 for others. So these are the permissions given. This is 7, this is 5, and this is 5. But the umask is 022, which is telling what all needs to be masked for the files that are created by default. Files are directories that are created by default. And here for files, it is created with read write with different permissions. So it is 110, 100, 100, which is nothing but 644. Okay, so I think there is a command which will actually get the umask details for the files also, which are default permissions. So if we want to override these things, then we have to use this umask command. Here we are trying to create all the permissions with 755 by default for the user, which will try to set up the cluster. So umask is to change the default permissions for the user who try to set up the cluster. And then the second prerequisite is to disable SE Linux. You can also use enabled version, but it is a little bit more complicated than this. Typically in the enterprises, we will disable the SE Linux. So SE Linux stands for Security Enforcing Linux. Okay, SE Linux stands for Security Enforcing Linux. Okay, and to disable it, we have to change a file called etc SE Linux config. Because we are trying to modify the file etc SE Linux config on all the servers in one shot using parallel SSH, we cannot use VA editor or nano editor to open up the files and then modify them. We have to script it. So SCD is a script. SCD is a command which can perform the replaces in a file easily. So SCD-I, we are searching for this line SC Linux equal to enforcing, and we are actually replacing the enforcing to disabled in this file called etc SC Linux /config. So I am logging into the same host using another terminal. And opening the file. Again, as an administrator, unless you are absolutely sure what you are modifying, and unless you want to modify a file, you should never open the file in read-only mode. Okay, so you should never open a file in writable mode. So view, even though if you have permissions to write on a file, will limit you to not to open the file in editable mode. So it will be a very good practice, especially for the MS students and OPTs when you go on to the job. By claiming the experience, you will make mistakes by abruptly modifying files. And also people from mainframe background or Windows background who don't know much about Linux, they tend to make the mistakes. To avoid those mistakes, use view command always when you don't want to modify a file. In this case, I don't want to modify a file, so I am using view command here and config. And if you see here, SC Linux is disabled, but when you actually set up, by default it will be enabled. So this script will actually modify SC Linux equal to enforcing to SC Linux equal to disabled. And then you have to set up NTPD. What is NTPD? NTPD stands for Network Time Protocol. Okay, when you set up the cluster, all the clocks on all the hosts in the cluster have to be in sync. Okay, for that, in an enterprise, we will have a centralized time server, and we have to point all the clocks on all the hosts to that centralized time server. For that, we have to install something called NTP. You can do that by using yum-y install NTP. We have to actually in a real enterprise you have to make the configuration changes also. But for us, we are actually using the default time servers for both AWS as well as the VM, so we don't need to make any changes. But for enterprise where they have a centralized time server locally, you have to make certain configuration changes the way we have done for our yum repositories. for HTTP server to set up M repository, you have to identify the appropriate configuration file, make changes, or you can also use NTP related commands to make the necessary changes to point to the local centralized time server, so that all the clocks in all the hosts are in sync. And then you can actually start it. Check config is the command which will make sure that the NTP service on each of the hosts will be started on reboots. So we have to first run this check config command to make sure that it will come up automatically on reboots. And for the current session, you can start by running this command. And then IP tables and IP6 tables. So IP tables is a firewall. Okay. Typically, we will disable IP tables and IP6 tables and use corporate firewall. IP tables and IP6 tables are firewall software that comes with Linux. As we will have a centralized firewall for the enterprise, we typically disable those things. Even for AWS or virtual machines which we try to create, we will disable the IP tables and IP6 tables so that the ports are open at the firewall layer and remove the dependency on the IP tables and IP6 tables. So they will be already be there on the cluster, on the host when you try to provision with Red Hat or CentOS or most of the Linuxes. You just have to stop and you have to disable IP tables so that it does not start on reboots by running check config command. And then setting the swappiness. So swappiness, you might be familiar with physical memory and virtual memory. Okay, virtual memory is nothing but a file structure. So if you are familiar with OS concepts, there is a concept of swapping between the physical memory and the virtual memory. Okay, and that swapping has to be disabled. One way to disable is by adding this vm.swappiness equal to 0 entry to this etc.ctl.conf file. Okay, so that you don't so that it will disable this swappiness, because for Hadoop cluster you should not have swappiness enabled. It can have significant performance implications. For that reason, swappiness needs to be disabled, and this is the way to do so. And finally, there is something called ulimit. So, for example, ulimit -a is the command which will display the limits for the current user that's logged in at different levels. And one of the parameters which you need to modify for all the users, which will be created as part of setting up the cluster. So HDFS, MapRed, HBase, these users you will not find at the beginning. Okay, so you have those will be added when you actually try to set up the cluster. So there is so no file stands for number of files, and also nproc, number of processes. You have to increase these two parameters to a higher value in the production cluster. In our cluster, it does not matter, but in production cluster, you have to set up the two higher values. And these settings you need to get from the current documentation of the underlying distribution. If it is Cloudera, you have to refer Cloudera documentation. If it is Hortonworks, you have to review Hortonworks documentation. So this will actually ensure that all these users, HDFS, MapRed, and HBase, will have limits, higher limits than usual or default to support the cluster. So these are the prerequisites which you need to run. And first you need to create a prepare node.sh script or whatever file name you want to give. You have to copy to all the nodes, and then you have to run it. For copying to all the nodes and to run it, we use PSCP and PSH command. and for that we have actually created a script called setup_CentOS.sh. For AWS with Red Hat, the script is a little bit different. If you end up dealing with Red Hat, let me know. I will share the information with you. So this is how you actually set up the prerequisites on all the hosts in the cluster. Okay, so for that being said, we'll be wrapping up the class for today, means the discussion for today. I will open up for Q&A in a moment. By the time we come back to the next class, if you are using AWS, make sure you provision all the hosts in the cluster and set up the prerequisites. If you are using virtual machines, make sure you set up virtual VMware workstation or virtual box, create a template, set up 4 virtual machines, and set up parallel SSH after setting up YAM repository server, and then execute the prerequisites. So whatever environment you choose, you have to make sure that you are up to this level by the time we come to the next class. It is okay if you are delayed a little bit, but at least try to accomplish 66% or 70% of the tasks that are highlighted. And if you run into any issues, make sure you are part of the LinkedIn group, IT-versity-big data. So this is the group, IT-versity-big data. You can ask questions over there so that everyone can see those. So whenever you have a question, you can go there and see if anyone have already raised the question and start adding the comment section. Otherwise, you can start a new discussion as well. Okay, now we can open up to the Q&A if you have any questions for today's session, or if you already started setting up the cluster, even you can go ahead and raise those questions so that you can go at your own pace rather than me becoming the bottleneck for you. That's what umask is to mask the certain permissions. Okay, so as I mentioned to you, each of those 3 bits are nothing but an octet, which is 0 to 7. Okay, so if I say chmod, chmod is the command to change the permissions. Okay, so let's say I have the file, I already have the file testing, right? So if I want to give the permission of permissions to execute on this testing file for all the users, okay, then I can say 755, or I can also say +x. Either of them you can do. +x will only add execute permissions without touching the existing read permissions. If you want to give in the octet notation, you have to give it like this. Okay, so 755 testing. And now if you see the testing permissions, we have added the execute permissions using 755. So 755 is nothing but 022. So the way you have to do is take 777 and subtract whatever permissions you want to give to the users. So in this case, by default, I want to give the user of permission read, write, execute for the owner, read, execute for the group, and read only read for the others. Okay, so read, write, execute is nothing but 7 for owner. Read, execute for other members in group is r-x, which is 101, which is nothing but 5, and read only permission for others, which is nothing but 100. So which is 4. 100 in binary system. If you translate into decimal, it is nothing but 4. So 777 minus 754 is nothing but 0 to 3. So if I change umask to 0 to 3 rather than 0 to 2, then the new users will have only for new directories permissions will change the way it should be. Like the owner will have read, write, execute, the group will have read, write, and the others will have read only permissions. I will demonstrate that. Umask, I am giving 0 to 3 instead of 0 to 2, and then I am removing the directory test here. Now there is no test directory here. Now if I say mkdir tst and -ltr, you can see the permissions are read, write, execute for the owner, read, execute for the other members in the group, and read for all the other members outside the owner and the group. Okay, so that's the relationship between the permissions and the umask. Umask is to mask the permissions, to restrict the permissions, not to grant the permissions. So by giving, by saying 0 to 3, we are restricting the users the right permissions and for the other members in the group, and write and execute permissions for all the other members other than the owner and the group. Is it clear? Yeah. Any other question? This is not very important from the interview perspective, but while setting up, you have to be familiar with it. So the default value is 002. No, I think let me exit and log in back again. So I log in back again as root. Thus, it depends upon the user. So if this user is actually 755, this is root user. Actually, when we create the users as an administrator, so root is the super user in Linux. Okay, typically we use either root or some other user who have admin permissions to create users. So when we create the users, we will actually set the default settings. What should be his umask, or what are the permissions that need to be there for the files created by that user. Okay, so that's the that will actually control the permissions. I think there will be a file under etc, which will actually have all these rules for each of the user. I don't know the exact file, but that will actually control the permissions for a given user. It need not be 002 for everyone. And one more thing is, you should never give 777 anywhere. It is considered to be a security audit. I know people losing job by changing files to 777 in the companies. So 777 is read, write, execute permission to everyone. So if someone try to hack in to the system, and by getting password of someone else's, he can create a immense damage to the applications that are running on those servers. So be careful while giving, be extremely careful while giving 777, and be careful while giving 775 also. So even write permissions are very dangerous. So you should not give write permissions apart from owner for most of the applications which you have in the cluster. 775 is lesser risky compared to 777. 777 can consider as a security violation, and people can lose jobs. Okay. So next question is from Ram. When accessing AWS, changing PEM file like chmod 400, it's not letting me to log in. So I need to look into that issue. It's not only the file permissions, you have to change the permission of the directory also. Directory should have 700 and the file should have 400. Then you will be able to log in. So let me show you real quick. That way it will be clear. It's a very important question. People tend to get confused about this when they set up with AWS. So this is the directory where I have the PEM files. Okay, and if you see, all my PEM files have read-write permissions only. It does not have any other permissions for any others uh, on my system, on my PC. And now, if I go back to the one directory up and run ls-altr and see what are the permissions on the directory have 700. So try changing the permissions of the directory which is having your PEM file to 700 and it will work. So always have a separate directory for your PEM files under the home directory on your PC or your Mac, so that you know where all your PEM files are. So in my case, I have all my PEM files under .ec2, and the permission from .ec2 is read write execute only for the owners. Others don't have any access. So that's what I highly recommend you to use Cygwin rather than Putty. Okay, so Cygwin will make your life a lot easier over time. Okay. Once you set up Cygwin, you have to set up SSH packages also, so that you can actually SSH to the remote host. Don't set up the entire Cygwin; it will take forever. Only set up base packages and then install SSH and Putty on SSH and Telnet or any other tool which is required for you on Cygwin. Don't actually set up everything; it will take forever. So the question by Ram, please post the questions to everyone. That way I don't need to repeat. Now let me repeat. I forgot to repeat. So he started with question: when accessing AWS, changing PEM file like chmod 400, I am not able to log in. So the answer is whatever I have told. It's not just the file. You have to change the permission on the directory also. Then he asked the question: I am using Windows, so where to get to change the permission as Putty is not working? I told to him to start using Cygwin, and in Cygwin, your C drive is accessible using this one, Cig drive. So it's a virtual mount point for Cygwin, and then / and then you can give C drive users blah blah blah, whatever location your PEM files are, and then you can change the permission directly using Cygwin. And also to run these commands using Cygwin, you have to launch the Cygwin as administrator. So right click on Cygwin and use run as administrator. That way you will be able to run chmod command, ch1 command, all those things in Cygwin directly. Okay, it's very important to always launch Cygwin as run as administrator when we are actually using Cygwin to set up clusters and to execute scripts, etc. Good question. Good question. If any of you guys are exploring AWS, you will get some insights into it. And also, everyone try to monitor the other questions also, and please try to contribute from your side also. For example, Ram is already using AWS and he knows the issue. If someone else asks the question in future as part of the discussions, if you can also answer those questions, it will reduce the contention towards me, and people can get answers more quicker fashion, and it will improve productivity over time. So any other question? So we will wait 2 minutes after each question. If there are no questions within 2 minutes, we will wrap up the session. How to auto complete a command? Naresh, you have asked that question. Very good question. It's very simple. Just start typing, whether it is Cygwin or terminal. Just start typing. So in this case, let's say I want to go to the directory downloads. Okay. you have to, so when it comes to Linux, it is case sensitive, unlike Windows. So just start typing and hit tab after typing few words, and it will auto-complete. Okay, and then if you are not sure what all files are there, just keep, once you get into the directories, just hit the tab. If there are too many files in that, it will show whether to display all 128 possibilities. If you say no, it will not display, and you will come back to the same location. Here, if I want to search for something that starts with IT, I can type IT and hit tab, and it will automatically auto-complete. So this is how you can do the auto-complete. And another important there is one more question. I will answer that in a moment. Another important aspect is the history. So when you actually type the commands, you want to see the history. So history is the command which will show the history. And to search the history, there are two ways. One is Control R. Okay, and then you can actually search for any command, and it will automatically fetch the latest command. Okay, and if you want to go back to the previous command, there should be a command for that also, so that you can actually so there are many SSHs here. So if you want to go through each of the SSHs and get to the one you are looking for, I think with respect to controller, you have to keep typing. Let me do it again. Controller SSH minus capital. Sorry, I never use controller. I use more effective way, but it is a little bit more complicated. Controller is simpler way, but it does not provide all the features. Now I am searching for command. So SSH -a EC2 -user. So if you are looking for a particular command, you just keep on typing, and whenever the matching command comes, you can directly hit enter, and it will automatically connect you to there. Okay, but the more effective way of doing it is, if you are familiar with VI, there is a command called set-o VI. Okay, so once you run that command, you can access the terminal using VI editor commands also. So now, once you run set-o VI, you can actually type commands in escape mode as well as insert mode. By default, it will be in insert mode. If you want to go to escape mode, just hit escape. I have hit the escape now. And if I want to search for a command, just use / the same way which you do in VI editor. You can search for a particular command here and hit enter, and it will bring the latest command out of the list. And if you want to go to the next command, you can hit N, and whenever you find the appropriate command, you can hit enter. So set-o VI is the one which I most frequently use to search my commands from the history. If you know about VI editor, try to leverage that. It will make your life a lot easier. For example, once I search for it, if I want to modify EC2-user to root, I can use W to move. In the escape mode, I can use W to move one word at a time, which I hit 3 times and I move here. Now if I want to delete EC2-user, it has 3 words, EC2-user. So I can say D3W. Sorry. I think D3W will not work. So DW. I just type DW to delete one word at a time, and now I can go to the insert mode and type root. So that's how we can replace. And also you can actually go back to where you want and perform all type of VI type commands. Like if you want to switch to uppercase, you can just hit tilde on the character and it will change it. So you can leverage the VI knowledge while playing with the commands, which can increase productivity significantly over time. Okay, so this is another very important thing as an administrator which you need to master over time, which can improve productivity significantly. And then another one is like you did it in setting Foxy proxy by typing np. I think you might be asking this one only. Okay, cool. So that's it for today. We are already 5 minutes past. So we'll catch up on Tuesday. Make sure you complete the task which I have explained. As I have explained earlier, I will upload the video within next 2-3 hours, and I will annotate and also add cards so that you can actually follow using the video itself, and make sure to be part of big data group so that we can actually start discussions in case of any issues going forward. That being said, thank you very much. Bye.